Thanks for tuning into another Dolphins podcast. Miami hit the road with a 3-game losing streak and returned from a cross-country trip to LA, officially in the hunt. Joshua Houtz, for the first time since week 1, the Miami Dolphins have won a football game, defeating the Rams 23-15 with Tua Tagovailoa under center. It's a shame we can't celebrate Victory Monday, but man, Victory Tuesday still feels pretty good.
Victory Tuesday feels great. And I felt like, heading into this week, I was kind of like an armadillo. I put my shell up. I wasn't going to let this team hurt me. And then it's game day and I'm right back in there. And it was a great win for the Miami Dolphins, 23-15, like you mentioned. And who knows, maybe this is that start of something great. But like you mentioned, man, we're in the hunt. Victory Tuesday feels great. How have you been today, man? How are you doing?
It's so nice being able to just wake up and just go through all the podcasts, listen to some insight. And the kicker is there are people out there who are already just, why are the Dolphins winning football games? We should be tanking for a top 3. Dude, the season's too long. Football's too much fun. We live and die with this football team. Every single game, there's stuff to talk about. There's stuff to be mad about. And most importantly, there are stuff to be happy about. So, Josh, what I was thinking is I'm going to say mine first, but I have a rundown here, and I'll say right at the top. It's a little sloppy, so I want us each to pick one stat from that rundown that truly defines Miami's 23-15 uncharacteristic primetime win against a good football team. And what blew me away, Josh, more than anything else, the Rams on third down. This is a Miami Dolphins defense that is without Bradley Chubb, that is without Jalen Phillips, that is without Shaq Barrett. That's your 3 top pass rushers entering the season. This is a Miami Dolphins defense that held the Rams on third down to 1 for 10, 3 sacks, and an interception. Josh, what got into this unit? Chop Robinson out there chopping wood. It's awesome.
Yeah, that was amazing. And you see Javon Holland in the background. It looked like it was one of those Madden animations where everyone was just synced up. I mean, I don't know, man. We were talking about how the defense looked solid, the first few games. Then when Tua came back, just kind of pooped the bed, for lack of a better word. They came out here, whether they were hungry because they were going against a Rams offense that, had some nice skill players, as we discussed. I don't know what it was, but Anthony Weaver was in his bag. He was sending pressure. I think I had a stat I wrote down. I think they pressured the quarterback 17 times, and I believe they only blitzed Stafford on 4 of his dropbacks, the fewest since Tennessee. So they were bringing heat from different directions, caused an absolute panic for the Rams. And this was the story of the game, seeing Chop Robinson chopping wood, seeing Calais Campbell at age as old as me out there making plays. I mean, you love to see it. And then Zach Sealer, man, with the visor on. The first time I saw that, I almost fainted. I had to go collect myself. But yeah, man, impressive performance from that defense. What really stood out to you from that defense?
Dude, Zach Sealer, I've done this podcast with you long enough where everybody that's in a visor instantly looks the coolest. You have definitely given that to me where I definitely feel those vibes. I just couldn't help but think, watching Zach Sealer, watching Calais Campbell, the batted passes, the penetration. I think the first play of the game, Zach Sealer blew up a screen pass for like a 10-play loss. I just look back to that Arizona game, man, where it was those 3 drives in the second half where Miami gave up 70 plays, like 7 to 10 play drives. And you asked me, would things have been different with Zach Sealer out there? And what we are seeing with this defense still missing its top pass rushers. You have Javon Holland back in the lineup. You have Darth Kader Kohu back in the lineup, who gave us one of the all-time gifts when I forgot whose face he was in. It might have been Demarcus Robinson, just giving him a thumbs down, just sticking it in his face. Him back in the lineup. Zach Sealer back in the lineup. There are playmakers, man. There are playmakers across this entire group. And it's so strange to me because I think we did overlook Miami's lack of pass rushers, but what a weird development, Josh. Think about it. Chop Robinson had a sack. Quentin Bell actually had a great first step for a sack. And this was against a Rams team where we spent multiple podcasts talking about, wow, these guys are getting healthy. You have center Steve Avila back, and he snaps a ball over a Stafford's head, I believe. And there was a couple other that he volleyballed. And you saw Stafford being a savvy vet, being able to bring some in. But I think their right tackle is back. They had their left guard back. And I'm thinking to myself, Jesus, Kyron Williams, he's going to be able to run all over us. Like, this is going to be a balanced offense. You got Cooper Kupp, you got Puka Nacua. And Josh, Stafford goes 32 for 46 with an interception. It kind of felt like Crazy World, where you had the Rams getting healthy on offense, that offensive line looking like it's getting ready for a playoff push. This seemed like that perfect chance, the Rams winning 3 straight games just to shoot off into the sun of success in some type of way. But Miami, Quentin Bell, Chop Robinson, they made it work.
Yeah, maybe we should have known those guys weren't going to be able to come right back, but slide right into
That's
action.
the
But I
thing.
mean,
Yeah.
so Dolphins of it. You thought they'd come back and play at a Pro Bowl level, but Chop Robinson was absolutely giving them nightmares all night. You mentioned Quentin Bell. I kind of forgot he even existed. I mean, he kind of seemed like a Bigfoot as far as I'm concerned. Everybody's talking about how great he was in camp, and I think that was the last we ever heard of him. So wherever this pressure came from, whatever Anthony Weaver did, I mean, again, they sent pressure from all different angles, and it was just a total team effort. I mean, I think it was. I probably have egg on my face for this, but Anthony Weaver, when he came in, I thought it was Anthony Walker. It's not Anthony Weaver. Anthony Walker. I get them mixed up. Anthony Walker, right? When he came in, he was a little off in his first game. He looks absolutely awesome out there. He's getting those guys lined up. Looks like a difference maker in that defense next to Jordan Brooks. So we could gush all night long about how this defense looked. And when you're going against a Rams offense, who again, Sean McVay, offensive genius. That's why so many of these offensive guys are signed around the league. That defense stepped up in a big way, and it was absolutely a statement game for Anthony Weaver and company.
Anthony Walker's last interception was 4 years ago to the day, to the interception he had on Stafford. And Josh, I think it was Calais Campbell who had the batted ball, who tipped that up in the air. I think he had one, man, 2 or 3 drives earlier that had the same sort of fate where it was up in the air. And the issue for the Dolphins is the closest guy was like a defensive tackle, so he couldn't get over there in time. But man, I think it was pre-game. It might have even been Scott Van Pelt post-game. He had Calais Campbell on, and Campbell said that he's playing this season like it's his last. But my God, man, 3 tackles, 3 pressures, a sack, the batted ball, another batted ball that turns into an interception. He had a drive-ending sack early in the second quarter. He can still play when he's 39, right?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, I think what's interesting is he was a guy. I wrote an article for the Finsider saying, it's free Calais Campbell, let him go elsewhere. I mean, this defense needs him if they're truly going to make a push. I did think it was interesting. I forget where it came from, but there was a report that I guess Baltimore had interest in Campbell before the deadline, but nothing ever came about. So, yeah, man, that defense would look a lot different without him out there. I think the coolest thing he said was to create a wildfire, it only takes one spark. And I mean, we got our spark. Let's see if this creates a wildfire.
Pick a quote. You have Calais Campbell, to create a wildfire, it only takes a spark. Do you like that one, or would you prefer Larry Zonka? Campbell looks like a giant oak tree out there.
I mean, the oak tree, that's probably more accurate. Yeah. He kind of reminds of what we thought Raekwon Davis was, but at 38, he's a behemoth, man. He's an absolute monster. And Chris Greer, the Dolphins, they lucked into him when they lost Wilkins. Having Campbell come in here, want to play for the Dolphins, an absolute difference maker.
Is it crazy to say he's the best defender on this roster?
I don't think so. I mean, I might throw Zach Sealer's name out there just because what he looks like now with the visor. But I mean, this defense is night and day. And you can't even imagine what a 38-year-old vet that's been around the league can do to that locker room, especially when they've been through such tumultuous times, over these last few weeks. So his value is probably even more so than what we see on the field each day.
Dude, it's so crazy. And this is like full blown, like 150% homerism. But God, I want him to come back next year so badly. Like just, the entire idea was this was his final ride. He wanted to go to a playoff team for a playoff push. And it's just incredible, man. 38 years old, play after play, the consistency is just there. And I don't know enough about defensive tackles to make any sweeping statement, but man, like, if you showed me like 4 plays of this Dolphins team with Calais Campbell and Zach Sealer, and you showed me 4 plays with Christian Wilkins and Zach Sealer from last year, would it look outrageously different? Obviously the edge rusher and yada, 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 but like in the center there, I mean, like, I don't know if the production could be any better.
Yeah, they absolutely lucked out when they ended up getting Campbell. And I think another player that you had written down here, and I thought this is where you're kind of leaning, Deshaun Hand, he looks like an absolute player out there, right? He's making plays. I mean, how much of, having Calais Campbell take him under his wing and kind of teach him a little bit, how much does that further his game? Who can even imagine? But yeah, man, you put these defenses side by side, I think we'd be, you won't be able to tell the difference between Christian Wilkins and a 38-year-old Calais Campbell. And that's just absolutely crazy to talk about how good Calais Campbell's playing.
Deshaun Hand with 3 tackles, a tackle for a loss, and a forced fumble. Josh, that's notable because over the weekend, the Dolphins cut Brandon Peely to make room for River Craycraft. I think Peely actually signed with the Seahawks. So to see Deshaun Hand come in and step up, fill that void right away is very impressive to see. Josh, Let's look at this secondary for a second, because you have Puka Nacua, you have Cooper Kupp. Like I said, Demarcus Robinson is no slouch as a third wide receiver. He does a great job of being able to get down the field, stretch the field, and do all that fun stuff. Obviously, Kyren Williams, Josh, this is the first time this season he did not score a touchdown. What do you think about this Miami Dolphins secondary, especially with Javon Holland back in the mix? Because I think there was one play that stood out above all else that was a real difference maker for this defense and difference maker for this Rams offense. It was 3rd and 4. I believe it was the fourth quarter, and the Rams were driving. They had the ball at the Miami Dolphins 4-yard line, and it looked like Kyren Williams had this kind of a cut route over the middle where he would have been open, and it looked like Stafford tried to like sidearm. He sailed it, and Javon Holland had a chance for an interception. How has Miami's red zone defense changed? You look at last week, the Bills scored 24 points in the fourth quarter. This week, Josh, 5 field goals. That's it. I mean, this secondary, despite the pass rush being in and out, you have Chop Robinson and Quentin Bell making plays, Cater Kohu being back, Jalen Ramsey being an absolute stud, Javon Holland back. I mean, this is a unit itself that can cause so much problems. And to see that happen in the red zone time and time again against a Hall of Fame quarterback, that's one area that I think makes you really optimistic about if we want to talk about a playoff run. That secondary, man, could be a problem.
Yeah, and I wish I remembered where I saw the stat, but I think they were playing more cover 2 or quarter defense this time around, and I think that causes confusion there for the defense. I think Javon Holland's game has really, a lot of people were down on me when I said we should re-sign him. He's a big difference maker on that defense, right in that secondary. With him out there, you can see a world of a difference than we saw maybe the week prior with Jordan Poyer and Marcus May, who I even saw Jordan Poyer, making a few plays here and there. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's just awesome that the secondary has really stepped up in this game against two of the, quote unquote premier wide receivers. I do think Kendall Fuller, correct me if I'm wrong, didn't he get banged up in this one? So I think
for the second time this season, he actually suffered a concussion. He was forced to leave the game. So that will definitely be something worth monitoring. We saw Chris Olave. He is getting some doctor's insight, some influence there before he makes a decision about returning from his concussions. So that'll be definitely something, Josh, to keep an eye on is Kendall Fuller. This is his second one this year. I tried to go back and in his past, this is a veteran who's been around the NFL for so long. I didn't see any previous concussion issues. I think he left one game with concussion symptoms, but I don't think they ever officially diagnosed it. Obviously, I'm not a doctor, but that's something to keep an eye on because, man, I thought Kendall Fuller played well. What do you think of Cam Smith?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely absolutely need to dive into the film a bit more, but I thought Cam Smith, again, second week in a row, I think I don't want to say held his own, right? I don't know that he made some boneheaded plays. I do think Kendall Fuller, like you mentioned, was playing very good football, and I had jokingly put, do the Dolphins now call Xavier Howard if this is a long-term, like a severe injury? Who knows what could happen of this, but I think Cam Smith, it's time for him to, lack of a better word, nut up, right? We all remember the video of him, just drop your nuts. It's time. If Kendall Fuller's out, go out there. You already got Jalen Ramsey, who, I've probably been up and down on him. I think I gave him some shit for that Keon Coleman touched interception. It should have been a touchdown, but he's been playing out of his mind. So, again, a hat tip to that entire secondary. What I do not want to see, though, is Cater Kohu move back out to the boundary because I do think his best play is when he's inside, playing in the slot, being able to come in and supporting the run game and things like that. So I don't know where I'm going with that. Hopefully Kendall Fuller is good, but I'm intrigued enough to see what Cam Smith can do.
Yeah, and Cam Smith's more that boundary guy, I think, compared to where Cater Kohu, I think you like having a little bit more on the inside facing those shiftier, maybe a little bit speedier guys with those quick outs, different things like that. Storm Duck wasn't active, but on a short week, that's another guy you got to kind of keep an eye on where you are getting ready for a Raiders team that did trade Devontae Adams. Their quarterback situation's kind of a mess. They already fired their offensive coordinator. So you hope the Miami Dolphins secondary can stay above water in that situation. Josh, just a couple more stats here I wanted to share. Stafford on third down, 4 of 8 for 45 yards and an interception. Stafford was 2 for 7 for 9 yards in the red zone. This, to me, man, it just seemed like, in a sense, a Princess Bride game where you had McDaniel on one side and you had McVay on the other. And we do hear it more and more each week throughout the NFL. It's the system. It's the Shanahan tree that's grown to take up I think a third of the offenses in the NFL are running the Shanahan system. Obviously, man, when there's that much focus on it, when there are that many teams running it, you're going to have a lot of different people trying to stop it. So I thought the Dolphins kind of found themselves where everything looked really weird Monday night, right? We thought this could be a lot high scoring. The Rams not scoring a touchdown. I think this was actually the Rams' first home Monday night game in the Matthew Stafford era, which I thought was pretty unique. But I think a big part of this game, Josh, I'd love to hear your thoughts, is that these two coaches just know each other. They're both P-boys. They both grew up in the Mike Shanahan system. And I think they just both came out on Monday night saying, I know that you know that we know that I know that you know. And Miami had enough to come out on top.
Yeah, and I mean, I like how you mentioned this game just being, the most. It's kind of like a rant, right? It was like the misfit toys of games. Like there was just the most, like it didn't feel like a typical Dolphins game, but the way it ended up, I mean, yeah, I do think they know each other. I do think they relied heavily on what these defensive guys could bring out. I mean, I think again, Anthony Weaver had a hell of a game plan for what Stafford and the P boys were trying to do there, but it's just I do think this is just two guys who know each other like the back of their hand and went into this game with the answer to the other person's offensive scheme. I mean, I forget where the heat map was, but someone from PFF posted the heat map, and it just shows where the Dolphins are going with the football, and you can see that defenses are now starting to realize that middle of the field is the the Dolphins' bread and butter. I believe 92.3%. Oh man, I'm terrible with where I put this, but I believe the Rams played split safety on 92.3% of their passes or something like that. So when you have those two safeties deep, everything is in front of you, and that Dolphins had to find a way to overcome it, and they thankfully had enough to do just that.
Tua Tagovailoa faced split safety coverage on 93.5% of his dropbacks against the Rams, the highest split safety rate by a defense in a game since at least 2018. Tua was most efficient on passes under 10 air yards, finishing 17 for 22, 135 yards, and a touchdown. Josh, I'll say unique performance from the offense. You come out of the gates swinging with a 5-play touchdown drive. You score in every single drive of the second half to put away the Rams. Up and down performance, Josh. Where do you want to begin talking about this unit?
Yeah, I mean, I hate that we always start with the quarterback, but that's where you were going to ask. You said what really stood out to you, what stats stood out to you. For me, it has to be the 9-12 on third downs that stood out to me for the Dolphins because for as ugly as this game was for Tua Tagovailoa, and it was an up and down performance, right? There were some great throws that he made. I think of Malik Washington, one through a crazy window. There was some 2 extended plays, the one to Odell Beckham Jr. for a first down, the other one where he spun out and hit Jalen Waddle. Like we saw these beautiful, I don't want to say Mahomes because there's only one Mahomes, but these special plays from a quarterback that from much of this game was up and down. So the interception was a yellow pass, right? It was an up and down performance from Tua, but when we needed it most, whether it was the spin out, finding Waddle, whether it was that pass to OBJ, whatever it was, Tua made enough plays when it mattered most. And that's frankly all that matters to me, right? We sit here and we talk about quarterback wins and things like that. We loved what he was doing a year prior when he was leading the league in the NFL, but that's not sustainable, right? We're seeing defenses game plan. They're letting the Dolphins beat them underneath, and we take what we get from 20 to 28, 207 yards. That interception was ugly, but did just enough when we needed it most. So kudos to Tua Tagovailoa, but I kind of agree with that same echo chamber that's also saying we want to see more out of our $200 million quarterback, whatever crazy shit he is.
It's so tough, Josh, because you have games like last week, right, where Tua did more and you still lost. You had games like 2 weeks ago where, I'll still throw out the fumble since I'm still here eating my chips. But 2 weeks ago, we thought Tua had a good game and you still lost. It's growth, development, reaching the playoffs. It's not always linear. And there are going to be times, especially in prime time, where things look awkward. Teams are playing you so uniquely where you got to try to find other ways to win. And Josh, one of the ways the Dolphins did try to win was sign Odell Beckham Jr. And I thought that he came in so clutch for the Dolphins. We finally saw the vision today. I think he only had a couple of receptions here. But Josh, how many times being a Dolphins fan, let's take you to it. The Rams had an 8-play, 66-yard drive for a field goal that made the game 20-12 with 6 minutes left in the game. And from there, Josh, I think Odell Beckham was so clutch because just the third play of the drive, right after Jalen Wright was tackled for a 1-yard loss, from the shotgun, Tua Tagovailoa pass short middle to Odell Beckham for 11 yards. We saw another play where we had Jonnu Smith be the option on third down, where I don't want to say Charles Clay. We did have opportunities where Charles Clay ran over Bills defenders. Dude, that was Randy McMichael. Him rumbling and bumbling and stumbling down to the 1-yard line. That was Randy McMichael. You saw him step up in scenarios, and then you had Raheem Mostert on, I think it was 3rd and 19, shimmy by defenders and make a play. So Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. Actually, I want to talk about Jalen Waddle in a few minutes, but you have 1A and 1B, and they're studs, and they can win you games. You know that, I know that, and every single defense in the NFL knows that. So the Dolphins, whether it's for 5 games, whether it's 10 games, whether it's a season and a half. They're going to have to deal with these situations where you have the two high safeties, where you have everyone playing so safe, and you need to earn, like Mike Daniel has said in the past, you got to earn those single safety looks.
Yeah, and I know it was ugly those first few weeks, but now you got Odell Beckham Jr. back, you can kind of start to see the vision, right? And when they take away those two options, you got to find other ways. You mentioned Jonnu Smith. I'm glad you brought that up because I don't want to take nothing away from what Mike Gesicki is doing this year, but that was probably more yak on that play than we ever saw Mike Gesicki have combined in that Dolphins jersey. So, I mean, that was just awesome to see. And then he found, what was it? I believe Tyreek Hill, man. I don't know if you have him in fantasy teams, Jake, but 3 of 16, I believe it was, 1 touchdown. Like the touchdown was nice, but that's a brutal performance. And again, just tells you how defenses are game playing, trying to take away those number 2 options. How long though until they take away an Odell Beckham Jr. and then you're relying on, hopefully River Craycraft comes back. And let's be honest, Malik Washington's really been a factor lately. He had a touchdown on that opening drive that looked just picture perfect, like you mentioned on the end around. We need him now in the kicking game as well. So a lot of players stepped up when called upon. I just wonder how much of it is schemed that way, right? You mentioned Raheem Mostert late in the game making critical plays in the passing game, or Odell Beckham Jr. stepping up. How much of that are they going out there and we're going to save these guys till later in the game when they have those fresh legs and things like that? I don't know. That's above my pay grade, but they definitely stepped up, and it was nice to see in a game where we had to win if we want to keep our playoff hopes alive.
There's 100% something to that, Josh. I think there's a full science, and we're seeing it with Mike McDaniel, and hopefully he's learning and he's adjusting. However, man, it does seem like doesn't it feel like everybody in this Shanahan tree, like you can, I don't know if break's the right word, but you can kind of just scramble with their brain a little bit, where it did feel like there was the end of the game. I think Sean McVay got a little like wonky with some things. I thought it was weird that they kicked the field goal on 3rd and 10. If you're going to kick the field goal, do it a few plays earlier. The drive before that, kicking the field goal from the 4-yard line seemed a little strange. Am I getting too crazy here by thinking that everyone in the Shanahan system kind of gets trapped chasing that perfect play once in a while? And like, we're hoping McDaniel grows out of it. But when you see McVay, a Super Bowl winner, who I think he is approaching, if he doesn't have the all-time wins record for Rams, is this just an issue with these guys and their thought process and something we're going to have to deal with?
Probably, right? They're probably, not only are they competing with the rest of the NFL and trying to, one up these offenses, but he's out there going against Mike McDaniel. You want to put your best out there. So I think it is just something that these people always get into, whether it's mental. I think Kyle Shanahan's also had, his issues where there's overthinking things or just spiraling out of control, using analytics. Yeah. I mean, so they've all been there. And I guess that's just these guys, like you said, chasing the perfect play or chasing the next great thing. And I guess it's going to be, it's nice to have, but I mean, that could end up being, their biggest fault as well. So I like this matchup between the two P-boys. Maybe we see him again someday down the road in the Super Bowl, but I'm just kidding with that.
I wanted to bring this up as a joke, but knowing the comments on 560 WQAM YouTube, you can't joke about things. But Josh, let's look at the Miami Dolphins draft class this year. We're liking Jalen Wright. Malik Washington is now in the mix. Do we got to give Chris Grier a tip of the cap here with how this group's been looking? I mean, Malik Washington, it's so nice that you can identify these traits and you can have this 6th-round rookie come in, score his first touchdown the end around, come up so big on 3rd down, and then just also be a consistent blocker in the run game as well.
Yeah, and that last part, I mean, I was giving Taj Washington his props because, we love our acorns here. I love him. I was giving him props for what he could do in the run game and that and protect, blocking, things like that. But what we've seen from Malik Washington has been a changer. So I'm going to temper my expectation. I'm not going to tip my hat yet. I'll wait a little bit longer. But Chop Robinson's another name, Jalen Wright, like you mentioned, Malik Washington, Storm Duck, if he comes out there, I mean, he's an undrafted acorn, right? So maybe we do have to give him a little bit of flour, but yeah, they're gonna kill it. We'll give him flour, like flour to bake with. We'll give him like that's what he gets for now, just some flour.
Dude, I'm for that because I'm not ready to give Chris Grier flowers too. But it is Chop Robinson's playing well. You got Jalen Wright in the mix. You see these guys. I mean, if we're gonna dunk on the bad plays, we definitely got to acknowledge the good ones. Man, how frustrated were you in that first half watching that game? Because obviously you start the drive or you start the game with a touchdown, and one of the most cliche football things in the world is everyone talking about the scripted plays, right? Your first 15 are always scripted and things like that. And we saw Miami just walk down the field, but outside of that, man, the first half left a lot to be desired. You score the touchdown, you kick a field goal, but then Tua with a an interception and then a really bad fumble. He was sacked 3 times on the night, and we already gave him props, so we can be a little honest here. I think he should have thrown up the ball away a couple times there. Things looked a little awkward, but at the end of the day, man, none of the issues or problems in the first half were bad enough to shoot yourself in the foot and go home without a leg.
First half was definitely frustrating. I hate that we are those old Muppets yelling, but can we tell Tua to get the hell out of the way in those situations? I mean, we know you want to make the tackle. We know you're upset you threw an interception. And then, again, I'm being a boomer here. I'm saying that he's like my defiant child, but he's there like laughing about it in his interview, like the hit and it, joking about it. So again, he played well enough to win this game. You know that where you want to see growth from him, but dude, get out of there. Get out of Dodge, because if you take another injury, then our entire season is officially over. And no one wants that. And no one wants that for your career as well. So yeah, we can poop on him a little bit. What about Liam Eichenberg? I saw you had written down that he must get under these offensive linemen or these defensive linemen's skin with what he does. It's
Nancy Pomplosi, man, is an absolute stud. Yeah, and think about this, Josh, too. When just to back up, I do want to talk about Tua a little bit more, because that Rams defensive line is absolutely incredible, right? They were absolutely awesome. Tua did a great job, extended plays, escaping the pocket. That spin move he had to escape first was absolutely incredible. But my God, man, it's so concerning, and you got to be so fearful for the future, where we're in a spot where the injury happens and you have everyone on the Dolphins saying, yeah, we're all telling Tua, you got to be careful. You got to take care of yourself. You see what he does with Jeff Darlington, the interview there. He kind of says, I don't want to be known as like the face of concussions. I don't want this to be my identity. He doesn't care. Tua doesn't, if he's going to put himself in that situation, like, you're a $50 million quarterback. You're paid to escape pressure and make these incredible plays that we know you're capable of. You're not just walk off the field. I think it was Kyle Krabs who tweeted, Marino throws an interception. He's walking off the field like annoyed. Like, Tua, we know you're a warrior. We know you're a fighter, but there needs to be a line in the sand somewhere. And it's got to be that, because just push him out of bounds or something, man. That is unacceptable that he's still doing. Like, you lost the 4 games and you were already trying to convince Calais Campbell to come back for a 39-year-old season because of selfishness earlier in the season. Like, I get it, and he can do whatever he wants, but Jesus Christ, man, you're too important to be doing that.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, the entire season is on his back. So you absolutely hate to see it. You hate to see him kind of, like you said, laughing about and things like that. But hopefully it's not an issue. But get off the field like Dan Marino. Get off the field. But at the same time, we do see both sides of the coin, right? If Tua would have dove out of bounds, just walked out of the field, you have people on Twitter like, and who cares though? That's the thing, right? People on Twitter will be like, why didn't Tua get in there and make the tackle and things like that?
You're always going to hear it on social media. That's such a big issue. Sticking with the boomer, it's today's society. You're going to hear somebody who has every single perspective in the entire universe just because we're all on Twitter or we're on social media.
You can't convince them. You're not going to be able to convince anybody their opinion's wrong anyway. So just move on.
Nobody goes on Twitter to learn and be educated at this point. That I think is a safe thing to say. My focus, my prerogative is I don't want to get people to change their mind. My goal here is just, I'm going to give you a reason to think. Josh, something I thought that was super interesting is from the first kickoff of the game, I see a number 31 sitting there back in the end zone. Raheem Mostert was back there returning kicks. He didn't get a single carry in this game, and he still found a way to be damn impressive with that third down completion to move the sticks.
Yeah, and I mean, good. I guess good on Mike McDaniel in a way for, I guess, being that. It's for lack of the better word, Raheem Mostert seems like he's in a doghouse a little bit, right, Jake? And the fact that Mike McDaniel is making an example out of, it is Raheem Mostert. Who knows how much Raheem Mostert's not like, just take me out for this game. Let me have my, I deserve to sit on the bench, ride the pine. But how much of it is Mike McDaniel saying, you just have been coughing the balls up in critical situation? I don't know, but for him to go out there and make plays despite, not getting carries here and there, to make critical plays in that game, I mean, that's just a testament to who he is. I mean, just because he's not putting up those huge numbers like last year, what was it, 21 touchdowns or something? He's still that same player and still has that same impact. And it's a marathon. It's a sprint, not a marathon, not a race. Whatever the thing is, we couldn't need Raheem Mostert down the line, but to see him out there returning kicks, it definitely made you think, oh man, this could be a Jalen Wright game. And I think Jalen Wright ended up having, was it 6 carries, 18 yards, something like that? A little bit of an impact.
He had 5 carries for 3 yards.
Jalen Wright at 5 carries. What game was I? I must have been looking at the last game though. 5 carries for 3 yards. Oh my gosh.
So that's what I think is so interesting about everything here is I love that, McDaniel kind of stepped up and said, all right, Raheem, two fumbles in 3 weeks. You could argue that both of those fumbles were game deciding fumbles if you really wanted to against the Colts and against the Buffalo Bills. However, I think that this game truly showed us that even at 31 years old, Raheem Mostert being in the league for so long, he plays such an important role to this offense. And I'm not saying the Dolphins should have done anything different, but Jalen Wright, 5 carries for 3 yards. His longest carry, Josh, was also 5 yards. So rushing game in general wasn't really working. He had 22 carries for 67 yards and the Malik Washington touchdown. But man, this was a unit that, despite not having Mostert, I think they missed him a little bit in the running game.
Yeah, and that's I mean, in that situation, it's okay to we're all sitting there, we've all been asking for Jalen Wright, but I don't even the 6 carries for 18 yards that he had last week, I mean, that's not something to really gloat about either, right? So, we need Raheem Mostert back into that, rotation, I guess, so to speak. Hopefully he just doesn't cough the ball up next time, but Jalen Wright, you do wanna see him get more involved. I guess you just expect more out of him than 5 carries for 3 yards.
I like the idea of Jalen Wright, especially when you have Achane and Mostert as your 1 and 2, like a package player. I think what he was doing really well, he'd get a carry or two, but then they'd flash him out where he'd line up in the slot and he'd do an end around or something and get 15 yards. I think especially when you have Achane and Mostert healthy and when Mostert's not in the doghouse, I think those are still your 1A, 1B, and Jalen Wright is someone you're just kind of mixing into things. Something I thought that was very interesting, Josh, very, very interesting. You think about 22 carries for 67 yards. The Dolphins were actually without fullback Alec Ingold, who's been battling a calf injury, I think, God, man, probably close to a month at this point. Do you think that played any role in Miami's inability to run the football, especially getting to the outside where you have him being like the cavalry most of the time?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess we knew he was banged up a little bit, but when I saw his name on the injured reserve, I knew that, it was or not injured reserve, on the injury report, I knew that it was gonna be rough going. I think that's what's so impressive about this game, though, is despite, not having the ability to run the ball necessarily like you did the first few weeks, the passing game was up and down. They still found a way to win, but to not have Alec Ingold out there, it definitely hurt this team. I think Tanner Connor was lined up in the backfield a few times. I think he had a nice block and then got hurt. They had Durham Smythe as well, I think, line up back there, but none of those guys can replicate what Alec Ingold does. So definitely hurt this offense, the run game especially. I think they were one of the top teams running the 21 personnel. I don't think they did it much at all this week because of this injury. So hopefully he's back if they want to truly push towards being in the hunt in that last playoff spot.
Yeah, I really do think that fullback Alec Ingold adds such a different dimension, just as a blocker. Overall rushing attack, you want it to be a little bit more, but I gotta tip my hat to Mike McDaniel for someone he's known most of his career, most of his NFL career in Raheem Mostert, right? Raheem Mostert said, "Hey, I'm going to follow him wherever he goes," and Mostert said of the fumbles, I think he just strictly put it, "That shit's embarrassing." So I think Mostert was pretty okay with it, and I think everything worked out for the Dolphins. And Mike McDaniel showed, like, "Hey, I'm going to stand up there and I'm going to make some changes when the team needs it." Anthony Walker stepping into the mix over David Long Jr. We see what he's doing. So, Josh, I think as the Dolphins move off this or try to shake off their second 3-game losing streak, it's nice that they're searching for answers. I think there were a lot of Dolphin fans who were under the impression of that we're just kind of going to go out. We're going to keep letting Julian Hill get these pre-snap penalties. We're going to keep letting these same reoccurring issues happen. And it just hasn't been the case. I mean, outside of special teams, which continues to be a disaster, Dolphins called for 1 penalty on the night, and it was Saran Neal refusing to get back in bounds. So, yeah.
Yeah, so you see some improvements, but when one thing seems to get improved, another area seems to weaken. So, I mean, I hope that this is the step forward that we need to see. I mean, we talked about the run game not having an impact. How much of that do you think, Jake, was because of Austin Jackson being out? I mean, that's a huge blow to that side. But then again, Kendall Lamb, for lack of a better word, stepped up. I think I'd written down 3 pressures per PFF, but it wasn't that glaring of a notice, right? Having Kendall Lamb out there, which that's why he's here, right?
I think the Rams defensive line, God, man, especially I'm so happy Chop Robinson had a good game because Jared Verse taken just a few picks before, just an stud, dude, looking like an absolute stud out there. But The offensive line, man, it's a little disappointing because Austin Jackson, he played every single snap against the Buffalo Bills, left the game with an injury, and all of a sudden he's on injured reserve. It's to be determined if he'll be back this year. So, and you got to keep in mind that's Tua's blind spot as well. We have heard Patrick Paul's taking some snaps there, but more than anything, man, it's like I think why we saw the issues with the Rams. The Dolphins were finally in a spot where they were getting continuity off the offensive line, and all of a sudden Austin Jackson's hurt. Robert Jones left Monday night's game as well on a short week, so his availability is up in the air. I did think that Lester Cotton played pretty well in relief at left guard, and Mike McDaniel did mention that Isaiah Wynn might be returning to practice by the time you're listening to this podcast.
What another win on a victory Wednesday. This is gonna drop tomorrow. So yeah, man, I would love to see Isaiah Wynn back though in the lineup, especially like you mentioned at a time when it seems like we need him. I guess this is why we can't count our chickens before they're hatched or our eggs before they're hatched, right? Because we were all stoked for this offensive line. We know how many different musical chairs we had last year. We knew someone was eventually a fall. It just sucks that I think Austin Jackson, they announced a season ending, so we're gonna see a lot of Kendall Lamb this rest of the year. Maybe Patrick Paul, but if you get Isaiah Wynn back, man, I think that would help this offensive line a lot. Got to tip your hat to Aaron Brewer. I know I'm just throwing out a bunch of stuff, but Aaron Brewer, he's been a monster these last the entire season, really.
Before we wrap up, Josh, the one thing I wanted to talk to you about, we got to look at the rest of the season schedule, don't we? We got to see how this is possible. I think I saw Pro Football Network gives the Dolphins a 25% chance of making the playoffs here. So it starts, Josh, next week with the Raiders and the Patriots, 2-7, 3-7. How can you not be 5-6 entering that Thanksgiving night game against the Packers?
Other than having this logo or the Dolphins logo on the side of your helmet, I don't know, right? Those are the two games that you just and most teams could probably sit here and feel pretty confident about winning. So we should be 5-6 at that point, right? 5-6.
Packers Thanksgiving night 6-3 in Green Bay. It will be a cold weather game. Great opportunity to squash some narratives. Then you have the Jets at home. You travel to the Texans at 6-4. You got the 49ers at 5-4, followed by the Browns and Jets. Obviously, Josh, the three big games are the Packers, 49ers, and Texans there. I think the 49ers, Brock Purdy's playing really well. I think they might possibly fall off. I think there's a chance of that with just how well the NFC West, is playing. And then you have the Texans, who have been dealing with a lot of injuries. I don't want to say teams have found out CJ Stroud, but they kind of have an idea of what the Texans like to do on offense. This is kind of what a lot of sophomore slumps stem from. It's the idea that, hey, you come in, you're really talented, you're a good football player. Teams are eventually going to figure out. They're going to figure out what you like to do and how you like to do things, and then you have to adjust from there. That's the ever-changing chess match, kind of like how every defense is playing the too high safety against the Dolphins. But Josh, of those three games, Packers, Texans, and 49ers, does one stick out as like the one where, like, if you could look into the future and see the result of that game, it'd tell you how you feel about the rest of the Dolphins season?
That's a good question. I guess that Packers game, right? I mean, at that point, if you can win 3 in a row and you get back there to 6-6, I guess it'd be 4 in a row at that point. If you beat the Packers, you'd be 6-5. That'd change everything. I mean, I feel like you're right though with those being those big matchups. I can't help but look at one of those Jets games and think that they could bite us in the butt as well. So to think you can only lose one, maybe. Can you lose 2 games? I mean, you're really close if you lose 2 games from here on out. So it's definitely possible. I mean, what we talk about how great this team looks on paper. I try to, continuously say I don't want to become that homer and be that optimistic guy again, but it's hard not to look at that and feel pretty damn optimistic, right, Jake?
The second weakest schedule in the NFL. Man, I like the choice of the Packers game, especially being in the road on the cold. But man, we're Dolphin fans. We know that it's not the good teams you got to worry about, even though they do have the mantra of they can't be good
Raiders.
teams. It's the Raiders. It's the Titans, right? It's these scenarios. So Josh, do you have a choice for, like, if you could predict or if you could see the score of one of the games against one of the stinky teams, if you could scratch that off and it'd make you feel worse or better about the season?
Man, that's interesting. I like that. The Jets, do the Jets count as a stinky team? Because I'd do one of them just to cheat. But I mean, I don't know, man. I guess I'll be a cliche or take the easy road and say the Raiders this week. I was gonna say the Browns because that would be Jameis Winston eating a W there to end our season in Cleveland. Like, that's so Dolphins. And then he has this great post game speech, and it's just like, son of a bitch.
He brings world peace with the after the speech after the
Exactly.
fact.
And the Dolphins were just sitting there like same old Dolphins.
Same old Dolphins. We lost to the 3-11 Browns. That's honestly, Josh, we're 40 minutes into this podcast, so we can be a little goofy. But that, to me, if I wanted to look at one game and see the final score, that Browns game in Cleveland, even though the Browns stink, that'd be the one where I could see the Dolphins losing like bad, and all of us just being like having like the shocked Tua face after seeing Vic Fangio call prevent defense on 3rd and a bajillion or something.
Did you call it Shock Tua? I like that. Is that a Shock Tua now? We got Hawk. I like it, Jake.
Shocked like Tua, but I'll take it. I respect that. Josh, I did skip a couple injuries here, so I want to get your thoughts on them real quick. Tyreek Hill is playing with a torn ligament in his wrist. Obviously something he can manage if he's still out there catching the football. Maybe they're running routes a little bit differently. Maybe things feel a little bit differently. But on top of that, Josh, not only is he dealing with the ligament injury in his wrist, he said following the game that he hurt his back doing the touchdown celebration with Odell Beckham Jr. and is likely to miss Wednesday's practice. I think there might be a little tongue-in-cheek there because I think Tyreek usually does get a rest day or two during the week. That's just kind of how the Dolphins go about things. But my God, man, there's no room for error. Why are we doing stupid things like landing on our back in the end? Like, there is no room for error, and this team's still doing these things. Boomer, I know it's not a huge deal. I think Tyreek's going to be fine, but guys, like, you're not 7-3. You can't be on top of the world. We're on the bottom of the world.
And you're Tyreek Hill. You were just voted like the number one player. Like you're the playmaker in the NFL. You should not be doing clotheslines or whatever the hell you were doing with Odell Beckham Jr. Like I think he was trying to go for like an RKO, and OBJ had no idea what was going on and damn near took his head off. Like both those guys could have been injured from just celebrating a touchdown against the Rams at your 3rd win. I mean, he wanted that touchdown. He had to have that celebration planned for a while though. It's been since week 1 since he scored. So I mean, I guess I can understand it from that perspective.
Not an injury, and I'm sorry this is going to be so offensive. Josh, when did Jalen Waddle become Mike Wallace?
Oof. I don't you don't want me to answer that. I was a huge proponent. I was pretty stoked for Mike Waddle. I don't know, man. That hurts though. Free Jalen Waddle.
3 receptions on 6 targets for 57 yards. He had a couple drop passes. I think I saw him blame the sun for one of them, which people took it as the sun. The ways all these lights and the cameras are angled, I wouldn't be surprised if some sort of light found his way into his eyes. But God, man, this entire season, I can't believe how the inconsistencies of Jalen Waddle, him being that safety blanket for Tua Tagovailoa, how he's supposed to be, he just hasn't been that guy, man. I'm just so shocked. I mean, this is the first time he exceeded 46 yards since week 1. I mean, last week he had -4 yards. Obviously, there was a trick play involved. 1 touchdown on the season, 11 receptions and 44 targets. Man, it just seems like something is just not right there.
Yeah, now I mean we're ending this pod in a sad way because I'm starting to wonder if this isn't just a bigger picture, right? I talked about those heat maps that I think I saw Pro Football Focus put out, but you see with Tyreek Hill as well. I mean, his numbers are significantly down. I mean, this was a 2nd touchdown, so defenses unfortunately are figuring out how to stop Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill, and whether it's the 2 safeties at the top, whether it's just throwing them off their routes at the bottom and the timing, I don't know. But Mike McDaniel, I mean, this is why you're an offensive guru, right? Tua Tagovailoa, you see those next gen charts, we see why what he's doing. This is why you guys get paid that money. Figure out a way to break through. I mean, again, you got all these playmakers. So Jalen Waddle has absolutely been a disappointment as far as I'm having in fantasy football. I'm definitely down to him, but I think it's just a total. The entire picture has been down this year, and hopefully, Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle, they break out, but it's not going to happen if you keep clotheslining one another, scoring touchdowns.
One other thing I wanted to mention real quick. Luckily, it didn't come to be reality, but CK Parrott, 3 yards per carry, man. He had like the saddest tweet I saw before the game where he was just kind of talking about how the Dolphins, if they were to lose, we could see some players who are like just fighting through injuries get placed on IR and pack up the season. And it really felt, I think it was Lisa Salters talking with Tyreek before the game saying, I don't know how to feel about this wrist injury. I've never felt like that. I'm just trying to be available. Before this game, man, like I'll say the first 2-3 hours before it leading up to it, I was scared that this was the end of the season. I was not super confident entering this game. I think we might have predicted the Dolphins to even lose or struggle in this game. And then just hearing people like CK talk about like, I think he's right too, where I do think if the Dolphins reached a point where the playoff hopes are gone, you'd see a bunch of people, not a bunch, but some people we put on IR, and it'd just be like a super sad development before Thanksgiving. So I just want to say I'm grateful that we get to come on here and talk about a victory Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday based on my rolling banner at the bottom here. But man, could have been a doomsday.
Yeah, and I know we're all in cloud nine right now, and it feels like, we hope, right? Hope, optimism. I feel real excited about the season. And you're right, we didn't want to die in week 10 and, have nothing to really look forward to. But at the same time, man, we're just dangling from the edge, right? Hands on the line. And we just takes one team to come over and step on our fingertips until we go falling down. And then you start to see these guys hop on IR and things like that. I was scared, though. I think right after I may have saw that thing, then right after that, I think Austin Jackson was out for this game. And I was like, oh, shit, it's starting already. So, yeah, glad we dodged that bullet. Glad we're 3-6, and glad we got the Raiders this week, a team that they should be able to beat.
No more injuries. That will be key for the Miami Dolphins. They host the 2-7 Raiders, who I think are coming off their bye week. And the Dolphins, one of the most surprising stats about them entering the season, man, is just the one win at home. Miami Dolphins, every year, it seemed like 7-8 wins at home guaranteed. And then you try to scam a couple on the road. That hasn't been the case, but let's hope everything changes this Sunday on a short week against the Las Vegas Raiders. Thank you all so much for listening to Another Dolphins podcast. If you're liking what you're listening to, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You have a spare minute? We always appreciate it if you could leave a review, comment, like, stars, all those different rating devices. We appreciate it. Want us to send a comment? Want to get involved with our conversation? You could either send us an email at AnotherDolphinsPodcast@gmail.com, or you can join the conversation at the 560 WQAM YouTube channel. All our podcasts get uploaded there. Joshua Houtz, it was great celebrating this victory Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And we'll bring it into Thursday with you. But that is it. That is all the time we have on Another Dolphins podcast. Thank you all so much for joining us. And until next time, fins up.
Fins up.